The ATSB has released its final report into 2 runway excursions on takeoff at Melbourne Airport in 2023. These serious incidents saw an Airbus A330 and a Boeing 787 take off within metres of workers and their vehicles on the runway conducting resurfacing works. The airport's north-south runway, runway 1634, had been temporarily shortened by about 1,600 metres from the northern end to allow for the resurfacing. These works and the reduced runway length were NOTAMed and were also advised on the Automatic Terminal Information Service, or ATIS. On the night of the 7th of September 2023, a Malaysia Airlines Airbus A330 began its takeoff roll on runway 34. Recorded flight data showed the weight came off the main landing gear after the end of the runway, approximately 170 metres before the works limit line. The flight data also showed the aircraft's radio altitude was approximately 23 feet or 7 metres as it crossed overhead the works limit. Jet blast affected workers and vehicles on the runway, with one person indicating that their vehicle shook violently as a result. Personnel in the work zone were not physically injured because of this occurrence. 11 days later, on the night of the 18th of September 2023, a Bamboo Airways Boeing 787 took off on runway 34. During its takeoff, the aircraft also lifted off beyond the temporarily displaced runway end within the 450-metre safety zone. The 787's radio altitude was approximately 15 feet or 4.5 metres as it crossed over the works limit. There were no physical injuries recorded. However, one worker reportedly experienced a stress-related injury due to the close proximity of the aircraft to their vehicle. The ATSB's investigation found the flight crew of each aircraft reported that they did not recognise that reduced runway length operations would be in effect at the time of departure and used the normal, full length of runway 34 for their takeoff performance calculations. The resulting reduced thrust engine settings extended the aircraft takeoff runs beyond the temporary runway end. Prior to commencing takeoff on runway 34, the flight crew of both aircraft either did not see the runway works and equipment lights at the far end of the runway or did not recognise them as being associated with a reduction in runway length. Although probably detectable, the lights were not designed or intended for this purpose. Similarly, the temporary runway end lights would not have provided an effective sense of the runway distance available due to their proximity from the aircraft. Aside from these lights, there were no other visual aids provided to alert departing flight crews to the significant change in runway length. ATSB Chief Commissioner Angus Mitchell says expectations, workload and time pressures influence the effectiveness of the crew's review of the flight information. As a result, critical information relating to the significantly shortened runway was not detected.
In both cases, the flight crews didn't identify key information, and that was specifically the key information regarding the shortened runway. Now, this was despite the relevant NOTAM being provided in their respective flight briefing packs. And while the crews assessed the ATIS, which gives specific information for departing and arriving aircraft, and it did mention the shortened runway, they recorded the weather readouts and not the reduced runway length.
Neither flight crew confirmed the ATIS version with air traffic control at their taxi request as required, and this was not challenged by the duty controller. The Bamboo Airways flight crew also did not review updated ATIS information after the tower controller proactively alerted them to the changed ATIS version when the aircraft was lined up on the runway.
The risk controls that were in place to prevent a runway excursion like these two are predominantly procedural in nature. And that means it really relies on the crew's careful review of the aerodrome information and then picking out and understanding the essential bits that cover the greatest hazards, and in this case, the greatest hazard being the reduced runway. Tragically, the outcome of runway overruns can and have been in the past catastrophic, which means that relying on predominantly procedural defences to recognise and to comprehend risks like this isn't enough, which is why the ATSB supports the introduction of additional defensive layers. And these defensive layers that enhance a pilot's situational awareness when it comes to significant runway hazards.
Both airlines have updated their procedures and guidance for flight dispatches to ensure that aeronautical information affecting flight performance, including changes in runway declared distances, is effectively highlighted or directly communicated to flight crews. In addition, ICAO has updated its standards and recommended practices for aerodromes to provide signage where there is a need to indicate temporary changes in runway distances. Air Services Australia is also reviewing ATC procedures for providing essential information to flight crews regarding works that reduce available runway lengths. The ATSB has recommended that ICAO likewise review its standards for communication of essential aerodrome information to pilots.
Of course, carefully reviewing all the relevant aeronautical information is a fundamental pilot responsibility, and it's a crucial line of defence in keeping both aircraft and passengers safe. But incorporating additional defences doesn't relieve pilots of that fundamental responsibility. These additional defences are there to prevent the holes lining up and to provide sufficient robustness of safety systems. Air traffic controllers have some very set responsibilities, which may not necessarily be advising flight crews of all safety critical information. However, where there is doubt or potential that a significant safety hazard may not be understood or acknowledged, they can use their best judgment when it's prudent to intervene.
You can read the final report on the ATSB's website by searching AO-2023-043 via the link below or by the link in our bio.